A devastating moment for Prince Harry's reputation and credibility, as he argues with a judge while in the dock, contradicts himself, appears to fib about using the pseudonym Mr. Mischief.
He contradicts himself somewhat later on in his testimony, acknowledging that complaining often makes matters worse. That is a lesson many would argue he has learned the hard way.
The atmosphere in London is heavy, with the kind of tension that usually precedes a political scandal or a royal abdication. But this time, the drama is confined to the wood-paneled walls of the High Court, where Prince Harry's crusade against the British media is currently disintegrating in spectacular fashion. For years, the Duke of Sussex has painted himself as the lone warrior standing against the dark forces of the tabloid press. He has flown across oceans, hired the most expensive legal teams money can buy, and staked his entire reputation on the claim that he was the victim of a vast criminal conspiracy orchestrated by Associated Newspapers Limited, the publishers of the Daily Mail and the Mail on Sunday. He promised the world that he would expose the rot, bring the giants to their knees, and change the media landscape forever. But today, that grand crusade looks less like a revolution and more like a sinking ship, and the rats are already fleeing the deck.
He also became visibly upset, some said to the point of tears, when speaking about Meghan Markle, telling the court that media coverage had made his wife's life an absolute misery.
The news that has sent shockwaves through the legal and royal communities is not just about a lost motion or a bad day in court. It is far more personal and far more damning. Key members of Prince Harry's legal team have resigned. In the world of high-stakes litigation, lawyers do not simply walk away from a client as high profile as a British prince unless the situation has become untenable. These are professionals who are paid exorbitant sums to fight to the bitter end, yet they have chosen to jump ship in the middle of the storm. Insiders in the London legal circuit are calling it a strategic retreat, a vote of no confidence that speaks louder than any verdict ever could. It suggests that the people paid to believe in Harry's case have stopped believing in it, or perhaps more accurately, they have realized that the version of history Harry is trying to sell to the court does not match the evidence that is surfacing. When solicitors walk away, it is often because they fear professional embarrassment or because they realize their client's instructions are no longer compatible with the evidence. It is the legal equivalent of a pilot parachuting out of the plane while the passengers are still strapped in.
I think it scrambled him a bit. He seemed uneasy from the moment he arrived. He was on the defensive and very bristly and very abrasive.
The turning point in this legal catastrophe seems to have been the aggressive counteroffensive launched by the defense. Harry went into this battle throwing heavy accusations, claiming that journalists engaged in burglary, phone hacking, and the placement of listening devices to gather information on him and his circle. These are serious, criminal allegations that paint the picture of a man hunted by a ruthless machine. But when the defense began to present their side, they didn't just deny the claims. They dismantled the character of the accuser. They began to introduce evidence that fundamentally undermines Harry's narrative of victimhood, suggesting that far from being a target of unwanted intrusion, Harry was often a willing participant in the media game, actively cultivating relationships with the very people he is now trying to destroy.
And the judge intervened 3 times to try and calm him down.
This strategy became painfully clear when the defense focused on Harry's accusations against Katie Nicholl. Nicholl is a well-respected royal correspondent and author, a familiar face on television, and someone Harry named specifically in his lawsuit as a perpetrator of these so-called illegal information gathering tactics. Harry's narrative relied on the court believing that Nicholl was a predator, snooping around his life without consent to dig up dirt. But Associated Newspapers dropped a bombshell that shattered that image. They revealed that Katie Nicholl wasn't hiding in the bushes with a long lens camera. She was on the guest list.
The Mail said that Katie Nicholl had called up Natalie Pinkham to ask her for a comment. She had given a comment, and then Katie had subsequently described her as a source. And Harry was basically saying,
According to the defense's filings, Prince Harry personally invited Katie Nicholl to a private party at the Kensington Roof Gardens in 2011. This wasn't a press junket or a public photo call. This was a social event, a party where the drinks were flowing and the guard was down. The defense argues that Harry and Nicholl maintained contact after that event, running in the same social circles and exchanging communications. The implication of this revelation is devastating for Harry's case. You do not invite your stalker to a rooftop party for cocktails. You do not maintain a friendly rapport with a criminal who is ruining your life. By proving that a social relationship existed, the defense has transformed the narrative from one of harassment to one of hypocrisy. It paints Harry not as a victim, but as a man who is rewriting his own history to suit a new agenda, criminalizing relationships that were once mutually beneficial.
But Harry, it was so crazy. It was like he couldn't accept it. And he started going to the judge, yeah, but Associated are just trying to strip all the colour out of it. And the judge was like, listen, I am a media lawyer. This is my job. I know what I'm talking about.
The defense employed a similar tactic regarding the accusations against Rebecca English, another veteran royal correspondent for the Daily Mail. Harry's lead lawyer, David Sherborne, attempted to present an email from 2010 as a smoking gun. In this email, English was allegedly seeking flight details for Harry's then-girlfriend, Chelsea Davy, from a private jet company. Sherborne argued that this constituted blagging, a form of illegal information gathering where a journalist pretends to be someone else to obtain private data. It was supposed to be the moment that proved the tabloids were breaking the law, but the defense's rebuttal was swift and grounding. They argued that checking flight details is standard, legitimate journalism, not espionage. Journalists ask questions. They verify movements. They call sources to confirm if a public figure is on a plane. By framing standard reporting as criminal activity, the defense argued that Harry is blurring the lines to manufacture a conspiracy where none exists.
So it was very striking how, Harry kind of just seemed to completely lose it. And then, he kept going, well, I'm very upset, and all this kind of stuff. And
the cumulative effect of these revelations has been a disaster for Harry's credibility. The courtroom is not Oprah's sofa. In a television interview, Harry is free to speak his truth, to frame his feelings as facts, and to leave out the inconvenient details that contradict his story. But in a court of law, feelings do not matter. Evidence matters. Receipts matter. And the receipts are showing that Harry wasn't just a passive victim of the press. He was a player in the game. He used the media to rehabilitate his image after his wild partying years. He used them to promote the Invictus Games. He invited them to his parties when he wanted to be seen as the popular, fun-loving prince. Now that the relationship has soured, he is attempting to retroactively classify those interactions as criminal, and the legal system is not buying it.
The real one that I think Associated have got a problem with is the flights, right? So they blag information.
This collapse of the legal strategy explains why his lawyers are walking away. When a legal team resigns, it is often because they have reached an ethical impasse. They cannot present a case they know to be false, nor can they follow instructions from a client who refuses to accept reality. The resignation is a signal to the world that the case is unsustainable. It leaves Harry exposed, not just legally, but emotionally. He is now standing alone in a fight that he started, abandoned by the professionals who were supposed to guide him to victory. The visual of him in court, described by observers as miserable, diminished, and anxious, reflects the internal reality of a man who realizes he has overplayed his hand.
So Harry, acting like an entitled little brat on the stand, is not just bad news for his own case, it's bad news for Elton John and David Furnish and Sadie Frost and Elizabeth Hurley and all of the other celebrities.
To fully grasp the magnitude of this failure, we must look at the psychological landscape Harry is navigating. He has spent the last 5 years building an identity based on the idea that he fled a toxic environment that was trying to destroy him. A key pillar of that identity is the belief that the British press is an evil entity that has never done anything but harm him. This lawsuit was the physical manifestation of that belief. It was his attempt to force the world to agree with him. But as the defense peels back the layers of the past, they are revealing a much more complicated reality. A young Harry who enjoyed the limelight, who used journalists to boost his profile, and who operated within the ecosystem he now claims to despise. Facing this reality in open court is likely creating a cognitive dissonance that is crushing him. He is being forced to confront the fact that he was not merely a victim, but a participant.
Harry decided to use a court case, which already poses so many issues for King Charles, to take digs at the British royal family, at the institution of which he is a part.
Adding to the crushing weight of this situation is the glaring absence of his wife. Meghan Markle is an ocean away in Montecito, maintaining a radio silence that feels deafening given the stakes. For a couple that built their entire post-royal brand on the concept of unity, referring to themselves as salt and pepper, two palm trees connected at the root. Her failure to appear at his side during his most difficult hour is significant. This was supposed to be their joint crusade. They both claimed to be victims of the British press. They both signed the Netflix deals to tell their story. Yet, as Harry faces the humiliation of cross-examination and the collapse of his legal team, Meghan is nowhere to be seen. This absence fits a pattern that many royal watchers have begun to notice. Meghan tends to distance herself from projects and situations that are failing. When the Spotify deal began to crumble, she was not the one facing the public criticism. Harry was. When the backlash to his memoir, Spare, reached a fever pitch, she was notably absent from the press tour. Now, as this legal battle turns into a public relations disaster, she has retreated to the safety of California. It suggests a strategic calculation on her part. She knows a losing battle when she sees one, and she has no intention of letting the mud from Harry's collapse splatter onto her own rebranding efforts. She is launching lifestyle products, teasing jams and cookware, while her husband is being torn apart in a London courtroom. The contrast is stark, and it fuels the perception that Harry has been left to act as the lightning rod for their collective grievances. One must wonder what is happening behind the scenes in Montecito. Is there tension over the mounting legal bills? Is there frustration that Harry's obsession with the past is interfering with their attempts to build a future? Meghan is reportedly focused on looking forward, on building the American Riviera Orchard brand, on creating a new, softer image. Harry, meanwhile, is stuck in the past, fighting battles that were effectively lost decades ago. This divergence in focus is creating a physical and emotional distance that is playing out on the world stage. Harry looks like a man stranded on an island, waving a flag for a cause that his own partner seems to have lost interest in. The psychological toll on Harry is evident to anyone watching the proceedings. This case was supposed to be his vindication. It was supposed to be the moment he proved to his family, to the public, and to himself that he was right to leave, right to fight, and right to burn bridges. Instead, it is becoming a public referendum on his judgment and his relationship with the truth. Every time the defense proves that he was friendly with a journalist he is now suing, it chips away at the foundation of his identity as a victim. It forces him to confront the possibility that his memory is flawed, or worse, that he has been manipulating the truth to serve his anger. To sit in a courtroom and have your own past read back to you, contradicting the story you have told yourself for years, is a deeply disorienting and painful experience. The tragedy of this situation is that it was entirely avoidable. Harry could have chosen to live his life. He could have taken his money, his family, and his freedom and simply walked away. But he couldn't let it go. He is driven by a need to settle scores, a need to prove that he was wronged, and that obsession has led him into a trap of his own making. He tried to use the legal system to enforce a narrative, failing to realize that the legal system is designed to dismantle narratives and find facts. He thought he could bully the tabloids into submission, but instead, he has given them the opportunity to open up his life to forensic scrutiny. By suing them, he gave them the legal right to dig through his past, to subpoena emails, and to question his credibility under oath. He handed his enemies the sword they are now using to strike him down. The defense's strategy has been brilliant in its simplicity. Humanize the journalists and expose the prince. By painting Rebecca English and Katie Nicholl not as faceless villains, but as working professionals who were simply doing their jobs, often with Harry's cooperation, they have stripped the case of its moral outrage. They have made Harry look like a petulant celebrity who wants all the benefits of fame with none of the scrutiny. They have turned the tables so effectively that Harry is now the one on trial in the court of public opinion. He looks thin-skinned, vindictive, and confused, unable to distinguish between genuine harassment and the normal functioning of a free press. The financial implications of this crumbling crusade cannot be overstated. In the UK legal system, the loser pays the winner's costs. This rule, known as costs following the event, means that if Harry loses this case, and with his lawyers quitting, that outcome looks increasingly likely, he will not only be responsible for his own massive legal bills, but also for the bills of associated newspapers. We are talking about millions of pounds. Associated Newspapers hires the best, most expensive defense teams in the country. If Harry is ordered to pay their costs, it will drain a significant portion of the wealth he and Meghan have accumulated. For a couple whose financial liquidity has been the subject of much speculation, this is a dangerous prospect. The collapse of the Spotify deal and the reported cooling of interest from Netflix means that the Sussexes do not have an unlimited war chest. They have a high burn rate with their security, their mortgage, and their lifestyle. A massive legal bill could be the final blow to their financial independence, forcing them into even more desperate commercial ventures to stay afloat. It could force them to sell more secrets, write more books, or engage in the kind of reality TV exploitation they claim to be above. The irony is palpable. In trying to destroy the tabloids, Harry may end up bankrupting himself, forcing him to rely on the media even more to generate cash. But the financial cost pales in comparison to the reputational damage. This trial is cementing a public perception of Harry as a man who is relentlessly combative and fundamentally dishonest. It is validating the critics who have argued for years that Harry and Meghan rewrite history to suit their needs. When the legal team walked out, they didn't just leave a case. They validated that criticism. They signaled that the position Harry has taken is indefensible. That kind of stain is hard to wash off. It affects future deals, future credibility, and future attempts to be taken seriously on the global stage. Who will want to partner with a man who sues his friends? Who will want to sign a deal with a couple known for litigation and revisionist history? The image of the lonely soldier fighting a war that everyone else has abandoned is a powerful and sad one. Harry wanted to be seen as a hero, a protector, a man breaking the cycle of pain. Instead, he looks like a man lost in a maze of his own construction, fighting ghosts from the past while his present crumbles around him. The empty chair next to him, where his wife should be, serves as a constant reminder of his isolation. He burned his bridges with his father and brother to protect his new family, only to find himself fighting alone when the going gets tough. Even his own legal counsel, people paid to stand by him, have decided that the distance is too great to bridge. Furthermore, this case has exposed the retroactive morality that Harry seems to apply to his life. He judges his actions from 15 years ago through the lens of the man he is today, and he expects the law to do the same. He looks back at parties he hosted, interactions he enjoyed, and press coverage he courted, and he decides now that it was all abuse. But the law operates on facts as they were at the time. If he invited Katie Nicholl to a party in 2011, he cannot sue her for being there in 2026 just because he has changed his mind about the press. This disconnect between his current feelings and historical facts is what has alienated his lawyers and destroyed his case. He wants the court to validate his feelings, but the court is only interested in the evidence, Ultimately, this legal implosion is a masterclass in the limits of PR. You can control a documentary, you can edit a podcast, you can approve the final draft of a memoir, but you cannot control a cross-examination, you cannot control the evidence the other side possesses. Harry walked into the High Court believing that his truth was the only truth, and he is finding out the hard way that the world is far more complex than that. The collapse of his legal team is the beginning of the end for his crusade. The privacy tour is over. The victim narrative has been pierced by the sharp edge of evidence. And Prince Harry is left standing in the wreckage, holding the bill for a war he never should have started. The verdict hasn't even been read yet, but in the eyes of many, the case is already lost. The only question remaining is how much of his dignity he will have left when he finally walks out of those doors for the last time.